Hi, I'm Bryan.
And I'm AJ.
And we have a podcast called The Director's Wall,
examining a filmmaker's career, film by film. First up was M. Night Shyamalan, then Francis Ford Coppola. Who's next? Is there anything to this whole auteur theory? Find out on
The Director's Wall.
Subscribe via Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or your preferred listening platform.
I'm Larry Bishop, and you're listening to the World is Wrong podcast.
We're here to tell you how the world is wrong. The world is wrong about
after last season.
This is the World is Wrong podcast, where we celebrate the maligned, misunderstood, and ignored cinematic arts. I'm one of your hosts, Andras Jones, and
I'm Bryan Connolly, the other one.
And you chose this week's film, After Last Season, directed by Mark Regan. And why did you choose this film, Bryan?
Well, you know, this movie came out at an interesting time in cinema. There was a time when there was a movie called The Room, and there was a movie called Birdemic. And these are two movies that were kind of embraced by people as some of the worst movies ever made, and they were actually selling theaters out. People come to like make fun of it and laugh, and there's still a huge cult following of The Room, and that movie still shows at midnight screenings. I mean, at least here in Austin, and I know definitely in LA. And this movie kind of came in around the same time, and it was equally kind of like made fun of by a few people. Like, it was mostly the trailer. People saw the trailer, and they were like, oh, it's so bad. Like, how terrible. Oh, it's so bad. It's so terrible. And it just became this source of mockery, and like a lot of people saying, it's the worst movie ever made. And it was kind of like a joke for not terribly long. And then, unlike The Room and Birdemic, it was completely forgotten about. Like, the world moved on, and was just sort of like, this movie's not even like a cult thing. Like, nobody cares. Like, this movie was like, people were into it, into making fun of it, and then they moved on to the next thing. And I argue this movie's not bad at all. I find it to be one of the most fascinating movies I've ever seen. It's unlike anything I've ever seen before. We'll go into it as to why. I am 100% obsessed with this movie and have been since I first saw it. Yeah.
Did you see it when it came out, 2009?
No, I saw it a few years. I maybe saw it in 2012. Yeah, I missed it in the theater, unfortunately. And this movie showed in movie theaters, if you can believe that. And I missed it, and I will forever be sad that I didn't get to see this on 35 millimeter. This is like this movie was shot on real live film, and it's kind of like it sort of was more popular in 2009 when it came out in terms of like the conspiracy behind it, like what people thought it was. And there was even an article about it in Entertainment Weekly about like the mystery of this movie. And that kind of like overshadowed, like outweighed what the actual movie. I don't think most people have actually seen this movie. I think a lot of people have seen The Room. A lot of people have seen Birdemic, but nobody's really seen this one.
Okay, well, I guess we're kind of getting into it. How is the world wrong about this movie?
I think it's because I don't like it when people are just like, this movie's so bad it's good. That's not a real sentiment. If it's good, then it's good. If you like it, that means it's a good movie. If you didn't like it, then to you, that's a bad movie. And I like this movie, so it's good. And it's not bad at all. And like, it has limitations, sure, but like I feel like the ideas and like kind of the imagery of this movie is so strong that to just chalk it up as another like, oh, it's just some crap. Like, it's like you can't deny that there's something unique going on in this movie. Like, there's something very special here, and I think no one really talks about that. And the few things that I've seen written about this, or like people's blogs or YouTube videos, it's all just mocking like how crappy it looks and how shitty it looks, and it's so stupid and so weird. And no one's talking about the really interesting aspects of this movie. which is too bad. Like, that's what's so great about, like, the cinema of Ed Wood, and maybe it's because it's old enough that people have gotten past the, oh, it's so bad, and actually can talk about, like, what's really interesting about those movies. Like, it was certainly helped by, the film Ed Wood, going back to Johnny Depp from our last episode. But, like, I don't like when movies kind of get this sort of MST3K treatment by the public, and then it can't go beyond that. And I feel like this movie kind of got stuck there, which is unfair.
Yeah. Well, I'm so curious to know what clip. We're gonna play a clip from the film, and then you're gonna give us the synopsis. So
sure, let's roll the clip.
Okay, so what are the steps of the exercise?
I will place a chip on my right temple, then a second chip will go on your right temple. I'll ask you to close your eyes, clear your mind. And then I'll ask you a series of questions. For each answer, an image should form inside my mind.
So the chips help you see, like, the thoughts that a person has?
Some of the thoughts that the chip's able to interpret. I'll see a basic composition of geometric objects.
But nothing else?
Not at this point.
So then will I be able to see your thoughts too?
No. The chips report let information flow in one direction only. You won't see any of my thoughts. But at the end of the questionnaire, we'll switch them. You'll have a chance to ask me the same questions and see my thoughts.
Yeah, the people I've talked to have said really great things about them, but still I haven't talked to everybody. Have you ever had a bad experience with the chips?
No. I've worked with 8 previous subjects. None of them given any negative feedback.
And there's no danger to the brain?
No. The electrical signals created are far too weak to cause any harm. The worst thing that can happen is I don't see anything at all. Sometimes the chips can't read the brain signals of certain subjects. And there's also a safety mechanism. When you want to end the thought transmission, either open your eyes or just remove the chip from your temple.
All right, so that was a scene of, like, these people kind of recounting, like, what they're seeing in their head. They're seeing these images in their head, and they're talking to each other of the images they see. So this movie, like, the plot is, like, I've seen this movie a lot, and I'm still a little fuzzy on some of the details of the plot. Like, it gets a little confusing to me. But basically, there's 2 sort of med students, and they're kind of studying some brain stuff. And they go to this room, I'm assuming is like a lab room in like their med school. And they're kind of trying out this almost like psychic sort of like brainwave, like, I'm going to think of a thing, you try to tell me what you see, or I'm going to tell you what's coming to my head. And while this is going on, there's murders happening. But there's also maybe a ghost moving things around, sitting silently at a chair. And then there's like it's like a lot of sort of like abstract imagery. You see what these people are seeing when they're recounting like their like these visions in their head. It's a lot of shape based. Think like Stargate scene from 2001: A Space Odyssey, or like some of the abstract moments from like Enter the Void, or maybe this is a little bit of like the Tree of Life, the part with all the planets and stuff. As it gets into some deep abstract color and shape sort of stuff. And then like it's like a thriller ultimately. So there's a who's the killer? Let's try to figure it out. And then the movie kind of ends. And you don't really understand exactly how it all wrapped up, but it seems pleasant enough at the end. People seem happy, and that's sort of the gist of the plot that I can kind of pull from this movie. It's a very slow movie, so that plot, they really make that plot last. Like the 2 people sitting in the room, like talking to each other about what they see in their head. That's like the biggest chunk of the movie. Like that's like a good 40 minutes of the movie. So boy, if that hasn't sold people and go and rush out to watch this movie, I don't know what will. But that's the plot. The plot's not important here. Like who cares about the plot of this movie? That's not why this movie's good.
And we're going to get to the bottom of this, why this movie is good. Can I tell you what my experience was like?
Because I'm interested to hear, because I've seen this movie a bunch. I remember the first time I saw it and my reaction, but I'd be curious to hear yours.
Okay. Well, this is why I'm going to love doing this podcast. Because I would never have watched this movie otherwise. Like under normal circumstances, I just wouldn't. If you hadn't suggested this to me, this had just come across my path, I probably would have turned it off 2 to 5 minutes into it, because there were just things about it that alienated me as a viewer. So like this is where I'm gonna count on you to like give me the key to it. So let me just tell you what happened. So I was first, for me, two things that are really like sound quality and performance, acting are both really important to me. And I found that both of those were really, I don't want to say bad, but if I didn't know that they were great because you love it, I would have considered that just very bad and just alienating. And I would have turned it off. But because you recommended it to me, I was like, okay, I got to watch the whole thing. So I just like buckled in and just like let it happen to me for about 20 minutes. And it just, after about 20 minutes, I was so uncomfortable, not just uncomfortable at thinking I'm going to have to watch this for the rest of it. And so I did what I often do when I'm in a situation like that. I started multitasking and I started working on our podcast website and drinking a little bit. And then like another 10 or 15 minutes passed, and then I realized that something really interesting and unique and original was happening on screen. But by then, I just had lost the plot entirely. So I was watching, I was like, oh, this is getting inventive. And I was sort of like, you know what? I'm not even going to watch. I'm going to let this go through. And then when I talk to Bryan, I'm going to be able to ask, because I want to go back and watch it once you've explained to me what's great about it, so I know what to look for. Because like I said, there are these qualities. We were talking about the last episode, like people who are prejudiced against mustaches. Like there are things in this film that I'm prejudiced against as a film viewer. And this film rubbed my nose in that prejudice. Yeah. But then because it did this really interesting thing, I was like, okay, well, I see why Bryan recommended this. There's some filmmaking going on here that I've never seen before. There's something like, and that's something in and of itself, to just show me something I've never seen in this level of invention on it for a very low budget film. And so I was like I was sort of feeling a little bit guilty that I hadn't really stuck with it, but I was like, okay, well, that's going to be the process here. I know I'm going to love this film, but I think maybe my lack of getting it is useful for the kind of podcast we're doing. Like, I'm going to be the world that's wrong about this, but is sympathetically wrong. So I do want to like push back on one thing. When you said that the special effects world was sort of like 2001 or Tree of Life, I think it's more like Pong. Like it feels more like real, like super rudimentary animation, like pre-Pixar, student animation with blocks and triangles floating in space, like a very early screensaver, maybe. Like very early. I think it's unfair to Douglas Trumbull to compare the two. No offense.
I wasn't really saying like the quality. I'm more like the experience.
Yes.
Of like you're watching a movie with a somewhat of a semblance of a narrative, and then all of a sudden it goes into 100% abstract, which I always love when a movie does that. When it's sort of like you're watching a movie, you think it's a regular movie, and now you're going to look at color and sound for a few minutes. And then like that's not a thing people normally, like that's the thing David Lynch does all the time, which I love. Like especially in the newest season of Twin Peaks, like that one episode 9 or whatever it was, where it just turns into like a Stan Brakhage movie or whatever, and you're just like, this is amazing. And I love movies that do that. It's always very exciting to me when I'm like, oh, I'm now watching modern art. Like, this is thrilling. I wasn't expecting that.
I would actually say that the way it shows up in this film, again, from the way I was watching it in my inebriated and distracted state, that it was actually, because of that quality of it, it's actually more psychedelic and disorienting than something that's like sort of that's great and integrated and you feel like there's a flow to it. This is very much like, oh, what the hell just happened? Okay.
And I think like a part of what I really like this movie, among many things, is like because of the bad sound and like it kind of, there's a kind of an emptiness to this movie and like a low quality to it that makes it more uncomfortable in a way that's enjoyable. Because like you have this like murder going on and it's like it reminds me of like when they're in the room talking and it's maybe it's at night. I think it is at night. And you have a few shots outside of just like the snow and there's something walking around. Like I know that uncomfortable feeling of being in a place like either like you're after hours at a job after it's closed or you're staying late at school. And that's sort of like you're in this big empty room or this building by yourself and there's maybe something lurking around. And that's and this movie is very quiet. And so like you have this very kind of simple synth or piano, plinking soundtrack. But then it's mostly just kind of silence and muffled sound of what I think is traffic in the background or water bubbling. Like I can't quite tell. There's like this weird kind of sound in the background of a lot of scenes. It just makes it more uncomfortable. Like where I'm just getting like kind of scared when I watch this movie. I get very scared.
I'm curious. Did you see Too Many Cooks? The video for Too Many Cooks?
Yes.
Maybe I'll throw in a little link to it in the show notes. I felt like I did get some of the same feeling from this. And I feel like that is like a much more audience-pleasing version that's, of this. This is like all of the creepiness and none of the fun of Too Many Cooks, but like that exactly we were talking about, this off-putting feeling that like if someone's making this intentionally, why? Why are they framing this the way they are? Why do they keep pointing at those arrows? Why, like there's so many, it's so alienating watching it. I should watch it I think watching it in a theater might be much better.
And like when you watch this movie, like little did you know, all you asked of a movie was a believable space. And this movie has no believable spaces. Like I've never seen rooms like this before. Where I've never seen a movie where I'm looking at it and I'm like, I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't understand the room that they're sitting in. Like when you try to figure out like the depth of the room. Or like you're looking at the wall behind them and you're like, okay, that part looks like a real wall, but then that's like a corrugated thing. And then what's this thing? And then why are there just blank pieces of paper taped to the wall? Like, what does this mean? And like, it's like unnecessarily cluttered. And then what I think is supposed to be a hallway of an apartment doesn't look like any hallway. Like it doesn't look like a hallway that you've ever seen before. You're like, that's not what a hallway looks like. It doesn't make sense. The rooms don't make sense. Like why? I've never had that feeling with a movie before where I'm uncomfortable and baffled by the space in which it takes place in.
Literally baffled because they're hanging baffles in a way that baffles you.
and like it's so interesting. And like you said, like there's these weird cutaways to just the top of an entertainment center, as if they're the witness to the conversation. And I guess like later, like that, or like a shot of a chair. And then I can only assume that means this invisible ghost person is supposed to be sitting there. But those shots happen like a good hour before you reveal that that's maybe even a part of the plot. So you're just getting these random cuts of furniture and in the space with no people in it between scenes of a conversation, as if it's a cutaway to something that means anything. And it's, like, why the arrows? Like, why the wall? And it's like, it's not just a cut. Sometimes there'll be like a little push-in on it, but it's not like the point of view of somebody. It reminded me a lot of, did you ever see the Lars von Trier movie, The Boss of It All?
No, should I?
That movie, yeah, you should. It's great. But like the gimmick behind that movie was that Lars von Trier figured out this, the cinematographer for that movie is a robot. And they programmed this robot to pick up the images of the movie And so that you get this movie shot with these really strange angles, like the robot kind of picked whatever it thought was interesting to look at. And so sometimes a conversation scene, you just see the kind of back of someone's head and it's more focused on like a window. And this feels like maybe this was this robot's first movie, and this is what got him the job to shoot the Lars von Trier movie. Like, it doesn't feel like a human being filmed this motion picture. Or not someone from this planet. Like, it's interesting when you see a movie and you're like, I don't think the person who made this movie has ever seen a movie before or understands film language. Like we take advantage of basic film language. Like when you see a house and then you see two people at a table talking, the film language we assume is they're inside that house, that we just saw a shot of from the outside. Like it's basic, like sitcom level film language. But this movie, like, doesn't seem to have even a knowledge of that, you know, of like even the most basic element of like wide shot, close up, show this, then show this. Like the most like the stuff that I understood when I was like 11 making a movie. This movie doesn't understand that, and that's what I find so interesting. Like even The Room is like, it's a silly movie and the dialogue is crazy, but it's competently made in terms of like, it has a room. Like this is the opposite of The Room, because The Room is about rooms and you can understand the rooms, and this movie has no rooms that make any sense at all. So I find that to be so exciting.
So when you watch this, do you, and it may not matter, but do you feel like, is the director intentionally doing what they're doing, and or is it accidental? And the question is, if you're doing something like you can't, it's really hard to do a movie that is consistently any tone accidentally. It has to be a choice. Yeah. Or else you're accidentally going to do a real, like, well-framed shot in the in the middle of your movie, and then you're like, oh, you could do that. But this is someone, I feel like the tone is consistent, even though, like I said, I was a little bit distracted by the time the movie really kicked in. But I did have a sense that even though the movie shifted, there was a consistent tone that someone made a choice about.
Definitely. And there was much, and a lot of the controversy around this movie when it came out was sort of about that. Like at first people were like, this is a joke, right? Like this has to be a gag. Like this is like, there's no way this is real. And then someone was like, no, this is real. And then there was the rumor that Spike Jonze made this movie. Like there was a big rumor that like, no, this is a Spike Jonze movie. He made this to advertise Where the Wild Things Are, because this came out around the same time. So they're like, oh, this is clearly a gag he made to promote Where the Wild Things Are. And Spike Jonze was like, nope, I don't know what this movie is. I did not make that movie. And everyone's like, are you sure? And he's like, definitely not. And it's just, and then there's a rumor, then it was even made weirder that it was shot on 35 millimeter. The budget for this movie was $5 million. How is that possible? How is that possible? Is this a money laundering sort of thing? That was another theory, was that like, was this used to move money in and then move money out? Because there's an actual interview with the director you can find. His name is clearly not really Mark Regin. Supposedly he's Asian or Asian American, according to Jason Kulas, the main actor. And he says the movie itself cost $40,000. That makes sense. I totally believe that. And then all the CGI cost $4.5 million. No, there's no way that that's true. There's no way that that's.
They just grabbed some screensavers off an old Mac from 1992.
Or what could have happened was this poor guy got like swindled by an effects company that they knew this, because I think it said something like, I think the director, I want to say he's a real estate agent, or so he's like one of those guys who like, he just was like, I have money, I'm going to go make a movie. Yeah, he's a real estate guy. And I wonder if he had so much money that some effects company ripped him off and was just like, oh yeah, this will take $4.5 million to get you these effects. Because there's just no way that it cost that much money to make those special effects. Like, no way. It's impossible. But, so they made 35 millimeter prints of this movie, sent it to 4 different theaters. Austin happened to be one of the theaters to get one. Then the prints were ordered destroyed. They said, don't mail it back. We don't want it. Just destroy them. Like, we don't want them. Which is weird. that they didn't want to pay for the shipping back, or I don't know what it was, but they just ordered them to be destroyed. And I don't know if they were destroyed or if one of these theaters actually kept it. I hope they did. That'd be so sad if it just got thrown in the dumpster forever. But there's like this weird thing of like, it's a joke. And like, I feel like watching this movie, it's definitely not a joke to the person who makes it. And I feel like if it was intentionally this weird, I just don't think it would have felt the same. It's not like a Tim and Eric thing. It's not like a Michel Gondry thing. Like, they're not playing with homemade stuff to be looking homemade. I don't think they wanted it to be made fun of. I think that this is a movie that someone really thought was like a thriller, and just in their mind, this is just what came out. Like, I don't think they're trying to be funny or strange even. I think they think in their head, yeah, this is like what a real movie's like.
Okay, well then let's take it on its own terms a little bit, because I feel like that's, first of all, the story around it is so interesting. I'm glad I didn't do any research. I just wanted you to tell me it. So I knew, okay, so there's definitely something going on here. Where'd you hear the interview from the actor?
He's quoted, where is it? I think it's on the Wikipedia page, but Filmmaker Magazine did an interview with the director. And they were just like, they're trying to figure it out. They're just like, who are you? Like, what is this about? And the guy gives like the most safest like answers that just don't make, they're just sort of like, I wanted to make a thriller, like The Sixth Sense. I love thrillers. And you're like, okay, but this is clearly nothing like those movies. And you're like, why did it cost so much? Because of the special effects. Like, it's just like very simple answers.
And why did anyone think, I'm confused. How would this possibly promote Where the Wild Things Are?
It was just a thing because people saw the trailer, and in the trailer you have clearly the paper, like CAT scan MRI machine, like the clearly paper mache.
Yeah, like an MRI machine that's made out of paper mache. Very, like, that's right in the first scene. That's like,
yeah.
So you have these actors giving this, like, they're talking about something, like, I don't know why they're talking about this. They're not acting very well. The framing is strange. The sound is off. And then there's this MRI machine that they're talking about that is clearly made out of paper. It is a paper and you're just... And that's like, that part is endearing, but no, this is just like, it really leans into all these disorienting aspects of it. So, but like taking it on its own merits, like it's just, okay, I can see the idea that someone's like, okay, to create, I think you're actually decoding it very well. So these weird cutaways are to the point of view of some sort of ghostly entity that we're going to meet later. And the bad framing and all these weird shots are there to create a sense of disorientation. Yeah. I have to feel like the bad sound is the one part where it's just like, that's bad filmmaking. Because I feel like...
That's just a thing that happens, sadly, with a lot of...
Yeah, low budget,
low budget movies.
But you know what? If it's on it, like, I get it. Like, judge it on its own terms. Don't expect it to be Mordecai. In the sense of throwing money around, everything in that's going to be professionally done by professionals in the film business. This is a different kind of film. This is a punk rock thing. But the choices of creating these disorienting images and stilted performances and odd, props that are clearly not real. I get that if that's, like, for me, it was an off-putting thing. But if I was in a theater and it wasn't so easy to be distracted and people were reacting to it, I could see myself having this, like, being drawn into the world of it more. Yeah. So as someone who has taken that journey, so that worked for you, that created that sense for you. And so for you, when you're watching this movie, do you watch it as a thriller?
Yeah, I find this movie to be scary. This movie scares me. I get caught up in it. Yeah. And, like, maybe I'm just more forgiving of, like, no budget movies, like maybe it was, like, and, like, its limitations, but, like, the shot where she's thinking of, like, this room and there's this CGI lady standing there, and out of the wall comes this CGI dude with, like, a knife, and his face is covered. It's terrifying.
It is.
And it's so quiet. It's quiet in the movie. The fact everything's so quiet There's no like scary music playing. It's just like, and then like when you're in an empty room and all of a sudden a chair just kind of moves across the floor. The first time I saw that, I was terrified because I did not expect this movie to have that in there. I'm like, wait, that chair just moved. Wait, okay, wait, this is like a horror movie now? And like because I get scared very easily. Like I am I'm a sleep with a light on sort of guy. And this movie really just like is eerie. Like I find when people are alone in empty space and there's like little things going on, like I find that to be very uncomfortable. And I feel like that was the intention of this movie. So in that way, it is actually effective. As for the weirdness, the way it's shot, I think that's just an interesting filter through a guy who's a real estate agent who normally has never made a movie, didn't go to film school, didn't study anything, was just given a camera. Like if you just look at someone's first movie that they make when they're like 8, like the frame, or even if it's like a camera, like when you take pictures of a kid, you don't understand kind of how to use the space. You don't really understand. You don't want a bunch of empty space above someone's head. This movie has a lot of that. Or just like the film language, I think, is truly as if you gave this to a caveman and was like, make a movie. And they don't know what it is, but they know that this device captures images. So you're getting like pure cinema is what this movie is. Like it's rare. It's rare to get a movie that is made by someone who I don't think has thought about how movies are made and just went but made one anyways. And I love it when that happens. Like it's very exciting.
How is that possible that you would want to make a movie without having seen some movies?
I mean, I bet it's like maybe he saw a movie in the way that like my parents do, where there was like, oh yeah, that was a good movie. I enjoyed that. What a delightful thing. Have you seen that movie? Oh, Green Room is so great, or like Green Book is so great. Like you don't think about the like I had a boss at a movie theater I worked at who thought the actors made movies. She had no idea what a director was, and she ran a movie theater, and she just thought actors showed up and somehow a movie happened. And I had to explain to this adult that there's a thing as a director and a writer who actually they have to make the movie, and it blew her mind. Like, this is a grown-up.
And this is why there needs to be a podcast called The World is Wrong.
But, like, I think there are people that just watch movies and they get caught up in the magic of it, and they don't really think about all the elements of it. I think we do because we have always wanted to make movies. And so we've read books about them. Like, when I was 11, I didn't know what a cinematographer did. I was confused. I was like, why doesn't the director pick the shots? Like, what does the other person do? Like, and then I learned what a cinematographer does. But I think normal people, like, I don't know how a football game works. I have no idea. Like, I don't know all the elements of that. So if someone asked me to put together a football game, I would be making up a lot of things, And so I think it's like this guy's a real estate guy. He probably thought, this is a good way to invest some money. It's a good way to make money. Make a movie. Like, put a movie out. And I'm going to make this movie. I don't know how to make a movie. I'm not even going to look that up. I'm not even going to study that. I'm just going to take a camera and do it. And it's like, there's music like this, like people will just go make some music and they don't have a lot of studying and they make their own thing, just like this is, or like art, painting. Like this is what true art can be. You don't have to study to be a good artist. You just have to have the drive to want to create something. And then you make something truly unique, like this.
So, if you're making this punk rock movie, like I get that, but then you've muddied the waters even more with this idea that he had $4 million to make this movie. Like usually when you're the self-funded real estate agent who's making a movie for the first time, you're doing it like this does seem like a Better Call Saul kind of situation, like if you're making a movie just on your own, like I get that. But if someone, that's where it gets into that Room territory. Like, how do you spend all that money and make this? And I get what you're saying. Like, but there's like, I think, so is this one of those things where like the mystery of it, like I'm feeling it happening to me. Now I am now under this movie spell in part because of the story and the mystery surrounding it. Now I want to rewatch it thinking this is a $4 million movie. What the fuck? Who gave him $4 million if he doesn't know how to make a movie?
Or maybe it's his own money. Maybe he just saved up money. Maybe he's
How
rich.
did he get
He's like,
$4 million
to
like, okay, yeah, maybe. Okay, fine. You know, so the mystery and the mystique of this film grows. Talk to me about the acting performances. What do you think about that?
I really want to hang out with the main two people. Like I'm somehow very drawn to them, and like it feels very natural.
Jason Kulas and Peggy McClellan.
Like I feel like they're not going big. Like these are the most solid performances of the 3 movies we've covered, the 4 movies we've now covered for our podcast. Like these are understated performances. Like they are. I believe in what they're saying. I believe that they think they're acting in a thriller. And man, do they sell it. And there's like an innocence to both of them where I feel like I just feel like I'm eavesdropping on these two people trying to figure out the situation. It's and like these are all clearly like in my mind local actors of, you know, wherever they filmed this movie. Like these are in my mind this is like, you know, regional theater actors or something. These aren't people that are normally in movies. And I've seen much worse, but there's definitely like they don't think they're in a comedy. They don't think they're in a weird movie. They're just in a movie, you know?
Yeah. I wonder how they feel about that. You know, that's one of the things about acting in films as you're talking about. Like you might think you're acting in one movie and find out you're acting in another movie, depending upon how things are framed and how they're cut and how they're all these things that are completely outside of your control. And this is one of those pet peeves that I have when people talk about acting performances. And it's like every acting performance on film is a collaboration with the director.
Yeah.
In terms of how you're portrayed. And
there's also just a lot of trust in there. I don't think these people assumed that this movie would be hard to figure out what the rooms they're in. Like I think when they're in the room, it made sense to them at the time, and you just trust that the person with the camera is filming it in a way that feels like a movie. I don't think you question that when you're acting in a movie. You trust those elements or the sound or whatever. Like you're not thinking about, is this going to sound bad? Like
right.
You don't know that until that's not the actor's fault.
And there's a scene early in the film where someone is walking down a hallway and they almost look like they're in front of a green screen. Do you know the scene I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And as you're talking about this, it makes me want, you know, I think you could spend $4 million on special effects if all of these bad rooms were actually CGI fake rooms on top of actual sets. Like they actually filmed this in a theater, like on a theater, just in a black box, and then they used that $4 million to create the worst.
Yeah, maybe this is all built.
I mean, it'd be nice to believe that.
I mean, like using 35 millimeter, and if you're using 35 millimeter and you don't know what you're doing, you can burn through a lot of 35 millimeter. And if you're making film prints, like that's that's expensive.
That's expensive.
Like that's not like most amateur filmmakers, even like going back to like the 90s when things were shot more on film, they would go more with like 16 millimeter. Most people didn't have money on their own just to make a 35 millimeter. Like in 2009, how did this guy find someone with a camera and knew how to do it? To make a 30, like why not shoot this on video? Like digital video in 2009 looked great, you know? So like to commit to film.
I don't feel like I was watching a 30. If you hadn't told me that, I would have thought it was shot on video.
And I think like, to me, that's another sign that it's someone who doesn't know anything about movies. I think it's like them being like, well, I got to make a movie, so I got to shoot on film. Like, this is a real movie. It's got to be a real thing. It's like, this is like Burt Reynolds in Boogie Nights being like don't shoot on that crap video. Like, this is a real movie. You got to shoot on film. But not realizing how much money it'll take shooting on video. Or that if you've never made a movie before, maybe try it out on video first, then make a movie on film if you really wanted to. Because like that's expensive. So I could see them getting close to $4 million with shooting it on 35 millimeter. Maybe. I don't know. I do not know.
So, and did anyone from this go on to do anything else?
No. The director never made anything else. The actors did. Like, if you look up any of the actors in this, there's a bunch of movies they're in. You've never heard of any of them. I'm guessing there are other movies made. I think, is this Minneapolis? Like, that's the newspaper report, which was a printed piece of paper, said like Minneapolis or whatever. So I don't know if that's where this movie is made. But like the main actor, he's in 21 movies. I've never heard of any of them. I think
Casey McDougal. It was in an episode of Veep. So.
Hey, listed as credited or uncredited? These are the type of actors that will be like, I'm in this movie uncredited.
No, Kelly. She played the role of Kelly in the Discovery Weekend episode of Veep.
Okay.
So there you go.
Yeah. So I mean, there's other people, like, there's other producers listed for this movie. There's other, this movie had a crew of people. You just wonder how it worked out. But I mean, if I was rich enough and could make a movie, maybe it would be like this. I don't know. I'm no expert either.
Well, let's get into the sort of the personal nitty gritty, because I think, as you said in the last episode, the second film you pick is kind of almost more important than the first one, because, and I feel like especially with this, like choosing this as your second film is a statement of some kind. You could have buried this in there, but you were like, I'm going to lead with this film. And it feels like there's some level of a calling card. There's something personal. Like I told you, like for me and Mordecai, it's personal. I've had, we don't need to go into why. We did it in the last episode. But I'm curious, what is it about this that made you pick this at this point in the podcast? Because I feel like that's a statement.
Well, I always like a good challenge, but I feel like it really irks me how easily people can just shit on a movie, especially people who've never made a movie or even tried to make one. I'm not saying that every movie's great, it's not true, but I mean, every movie is work. Like, every movie is intentional in its way. Nobody, you can't really phone in a movie. Like, you can maybe phone in your job on the set of the movie. Like, you could be a shitty grip or whatever. But, a movie's hard work. Like, I made a movie on my own recently this year for nothing. It took me, 6 months to make. It was 6 months of hard work to make this little movie that maybe no one will ever see. And, and it may have bad sound, and it may feel clunky, and it may not feel like a real movie, quote unquote. But it was hard work. We all put hard work into it. And so this movie, clearly there was some work involved. Clearly this person had an idea. They delivered this movie, and then people are so quick to be like, ha, it looks stupid. Oh, it's dumb. It must be a fake movie. It's crap. And I just hate how people are so quick to do that, and without even having seen it. And it's just you don't know who these people are, and you maybe try to ask these people what this movie is. It's so easy to point a finger and laugh at something. It's so much harder to find what's interesting in something, and people just don't want to do that work. And I guess that's the whole point of this podcast. Is we're going to do that work. We're going to point out to the people there is something interesting in all of these movies.
We're going to point out to each other.
I think that's why I picked this, because I feel like people just chalk this up to that's another so bad it's good, bad movie. And I'm like, no, but there's something, we've been talking about this movie for an hour now, almost. Clearly there's something here. If it was just a bad movie, I wouldn't have watched it. I wouldn't have told anyone to watch it. This is why I picked it. I feel very strongly about finding something interesting in movies, in all movies, especially ones that look different, especially ones that aren't like everything else. This movie's not like any other movie that came out in 2009, period. And
it does feel like Minneapolis. I don't know if it's from Minneapolis, but there is some sort of snowy northern bland nightmare thing to it that I feel like other like big budget, like I feel like maybe a film like Fargo is giving us the very movie version of this, whereas the real version of Fargo is probably closer to this film.
Yeah. And I'm just assuming it's Minneapolis because of the newspaper reports.
Well, whether it's Minneapolis, but this has a northern, you know what I mean? It has that very white northern America thing going on. If it's like, would you be surprised if this film was shot in Florida? To me, that would seem strange. Like this film is like, yeah, so you could see this being a Florida film.
No.
Like made in the same region as the Paperboy.
No.
I don't think anyone in this movie sweat ever.
No. And there's just a tragic whiteness to all the actors in it. Like,
yes.
Like, even like it's like there's an awkwardness. Like this just feels like a very Caucasian sort of movie. And like even the way the clothes are, like it's weird that the two med students are both wearing jeans and a button shirt. Like they look like they're in a cult. Why is this what they're wearing?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make sense. They're basically wearing the same outfit. Like they were just told to like, oh, just dress like casual but with a nice shirt. And they just both showed up in the same clothes. And the director's like, yep, good, let's do it, let's go.
That's real. That's real.
Like her shirt doesn't even fit her. Like it looks like she's wearing a man's shirt. Like it's baggy. It doesn't like tucked in dress shirt. So you have these white people with these bland outfits and a snowy, location in rooms that are mostly all white backgrounds. Like it's like maybe this is the whitest movie ever made.
This side of Birth of a Nation.
But this one has much better intentions.
Yeah. This is
that movie.
This film is not going to hurt anybody, really. I mean, this is it. Maybe there is something there. Maybe that's what I'll enjoy watching it. Going back to it is that, like now that you sort of given me the code to it, I think there's something. I think my viewing is going to be much kinder. I think there's a way that now I'm kind of rooting for this film, and
you should.
I especially now that I know that there's this really nice change of invention that happens, it'll be easier to watch that first 20 minutes or so with the setup.
Yeah, and the first 20 minutes are hard. Like it does feel like a joke because it's like this paper mache CAT scan in what's supposed to be a hospital, but it's clearly a bedroom because what room of a hospital has a big window with blinds on it and a ceiling fan. And it's like the walls are, pink or whatever, and like it's not believable. Like it just seems like you're watching like a Michel Gondry gag, like it's like a Be Kind Rewind sort of thing. But then once you get past that moment, and I think people just got locked on that moment when they saw the trailer and they're like, it's stupid. But like once you get past that, it gets in this weird, uncomfortable, strange. Like I've never been shocked by an angle in a movie, and this movie did that. Where I'm like, oh. What the heck did they just cut to? That's shocking. Like in terms of just like how the angle was used, it's like it must have been when people first saw like the train come towards the screen, and they're like, "Oh, is the train going to hit me?" Or like, you watch, like I feel like you have your Citizen Kane, you have your Breathless, and then you have this movie. Like the film language has now been moved to a new, unique place that we didn't know. Like Citizen Kane, we didn't know we can see ceilings, and Breathless, we didn't know we can like handheld it and run around the street. And now this one, you can have compelling, shots of furniture and and rooms that don't make sense. Who knew a movie could do that? This movie did that.
It's funny. I want to give you some credit here because I was talking to a friend of mine who's another one of a film nerd friend who's, I don't know about you, but I've been talking with people about this podcast, and anyone who's into films, immediately they're like, oh, they have either questions, like they really get into challenging it and thinking of ideas. And I was telling him about this, and he's like, you know what? I'm looking forward to hearing it, but I'll tell you, you're gonna lose me 100% if he says, well, this film is funny because it's so bad. And I just love that you completely did the opposite, that you have the same distaste for that kind of, lowbrow criticism. And that,
I hate it. And,
yeah.
and the internet is just clogged with that now.
Yep.
It's all just like there's so many, and there are podcasts about that. It's like there's those jackasses who did that podcast where like, we're going to watch Grown Ups 2 every day, and it's so bad. Ha ha. And you're like, fuck you, I love that movie. Like, watch that. Like, try to think of anything interesting to do with your life, you know? And there's so many just like, how did this movie, like this stupid thing get made? And with like this dumb trash and this garbage and ha ha ha. And I love Mystery Science Theater 3000, but the thing is, they're comedy writers, and they think about it and actually try to make it funny. It's like that's different than some jackass in the back of the theater, drunk, pointing his finger and just laughing how stupid something is, thinking he's funny.
Yeah,
like it's like a heckler at a stand-up comedy show. It's like, no, you're not the funny one. You're not getting paid. You're not on stage. This person is. Shut your mouth.
Yeah.
So like when people so bad, it's the stupid. Like I got this all the time because I love Nicolas Cage, and we talked about this in the first podcast. But like I think he's a great actor. And when people want to make fun of him and make memes about like, oh, he's so stupid, like, oh, he's so bad, it's good. It's like, no, he's so good, it's good. Like, he's great.
You're bad.
Like, you are wrong. You're bad. And it's just like, it's so easy to hate.
You don't deserve Nicolas Cage.
You don't deserve it. Like, hate all you want because it's easy for you to do that. But like, it's much harder and much more interesting to really try to like understand something and try to see what's fascinating and unique about it.
I'm trying to think. I don't think. Can I? Give me pushback if you think that there's something that I might be wrong about this, but I don't think we're ever going to talk about a film here ironically. Like if we're going to talk about
no.
It's because like I know I might have sounded like I was ironic talking about Mordecai, like really leaning into the mustache thing, but I am not. I care about You know what? I care about mustaches so much more than cars, and I have to watch so many movies about fucking cars or football. And it's like, okay, I can get it. I'll watch a movie about football because Al Pacino's in it. I'll watch a movie about cars because Nicolas Cage is in it. But I finally get a mustache movie and the world decides to hate it. I'm not ironic about this. I don't feel like you're ironic about your love of this film, even though, like I said, it was alienating to me. But I believe that you are not. You wouldn't steer me wrong. I might not love this film, but I'm going to understand it. I'm going to get something out of this. And that's what I hope that, like, I hope that a listener who's listening to this, who maybe you're not even going to watch, honestly, you might even not watch after last season, but there's going to be some piece of art, something that a friend turns you on to, and you're going to be, your first reaction is going to be like, I would never watch this. And what I invite you to do is learn from the friendship that we're displaying here, and use that as a jumping off point for a conversation instead of like, I hate this movie. Like it's a conversation ender. I think it's a very unintelligent response to any work of art of just like, if you just like, I don't like it, which I could have done. Like I said, that was my, if I didn't respect you and I just stumbled across this film, I would have turned it off. It turned me off in a very visceral way from the get-go. But that's why we have friends who do the watching for us and are like, no. Don't be watching this movie looking for this. Be watching this movie looking for this. And if you go watch it looking for this, you're going to have a great time. You're going to get something out of it. And I hope we can encourage more of that kind of conversation about film. Because I feel like that's just so much more, it's so much better conversation. Listening to, like for these podcasts, I go and try and listen to negative reviews about the films that I'm going to be talking about. It's really disgusting. Like to me, it makes me feel like gross. And I'm like, why would you put something like, like videos of people kicking dogs? It's like, that's what it feels like. Why are you kicking this movie?
What did this movie do to you?
Like, all it did was try and entertain you, and you feel like you have to, like, I get it. Some people feel like they have to have an opinion about everything because what makes them a critic, and that's a tough burden to bear. But I'm glad I don't have to bear it. Like, we're only going to be talking about stuff we truly love.
Yeah.
Hey y'all, it's Amy from the Pink Among Men podcast. I know, you are really, really busy with your sourdough starter and your 4th rewatch of The Office. So it's totally cool if you don't have time for an informative, perspective-bending podcast right now. But if you do have a few minutes to spare in your jam-packed schedule, I want to offer Pink Among Men for your consideration. Pink Among Men is a weekly conversation on different perspectives, gender, and marginalization in the creative community. We chat with actors from shows you watch, directors who make movies that you want to watch, and comedians from stand-up shows that you'll probably never watch, but you should. Every Wednesday, they sit down to talk about the tragedy and the triumph that comes with not being a white dude in arts and entertainment. You probably don't have time for it, but maybe subscribe so you can listen when you're a little less busy. Get Pink Among Men on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. We're a proud member of the Paper House Network.
Well, speaking of stuff we truly love, hey, let's try this. You know where you can find Bryan Connolly? You can find him doing the Director's Wall podcast, where he and his co-host AJ Gonzalez, both former Vulcan video clerks, talk about the filmography of a great director. They did M. Night Shyamalan, and they're in the middle of doing Francis Ford Coppola. And, well, by the time you hear this, I don't know, maybe they'll be more towards the end of doing Francis Ford Coppola. And there's a great conversations, and you can find it wherever you find your podcast, The Director's Wall. Now, see if you can do Radio 8 Ball.
So, yeah, Andras does a show called Radio 8 Ball, where they pick songs at random and then use them to answer questions.
Very close.
Is that what you said, right? Is that close?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're the musical divination show, right?
Yeah.
And you can find it wherever you find your podcasts at radio8ball.com, all one word with the number 8. And what's our next film going to be, Bryan?
It's your pick.
Oh, yeah. I'm so
you
excited
tell
about
me.
it. The Strange Love of Martha Ivers. This was a film. I rewatched it again last night. It is so good. There is something inside it for you, Bryan, when there's going to be a moment that your brain is going to explode when you're watching this movie. They're going to be, for those of you who are not Bryan, there are going to be many moments where your brain explodes. This is the first film of Kirk Douglas. It stars Barbara Stanwyck at her most Barbara Stanwyckness with Lisbeth Scott and Van Heflin making us reappraise Van Heflin. So check it out, people.
I don't even know who that is. I'm excited. Let's do it.
Yes. So, well, thanks for listening to this podcast about after last season. And wherever you are, remember, the world is wrong. And it's probably wrong about you.
One cabinet is open.
Then there's a cereal box on the counter.
I only see the shape of the box. We're moving toward another door.
Yeah, there are 2 chairs by the sink, and one of them seems to have a piece of paper on it, but I think it's just blank.
There's an object. There's some kind of ornament on the door.
Yeah, it's a board. There's a small board on the door.
Radio 8 Ball.
Andras here. When I'm not co-hosting The World is Wrong podcast, I'm hosting and producing the Radio 8 Ball podcast, where we answer questions by picking songs at random, like picking musical tarot cards. We've hosted musical divinations for people like John C. Reilly, Patricia Arquette, Tig Notaro, and Fred Armisen, and hosted over 200 songwriters, providing the randomly chosen answers from Inara George and Dan Byrne to Mose Allison and Alan Toussaint. That's Radio 8 Ball, all one word. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts and download our app from the iTunes App Store.
Show.